Hello. Our next piece in the section on genetics is a white paper by the World Health Organization, Analysis, Impact of DNA Patents on Access to Genetic Tests and Genomic Science. This will also give us an occasion to think a little bit about intellectual property. So they start out, patents on genetic sequences bring together two controversies: commodification of biological entities and the patenting of raw data. So the concerns have been expressed about the commodification of persons, their biological material. So we have this visceral reaction. We'll see that this is common in bioethics, that the yuck factor, that our initial emotional responses change over time, and that's reason for being suspicious of gut reactions. But so there is that visceral reaction to the idea that the body, parts of the body, can be owned. Or in what respect do you own your body? We'll get an example of that in a minute. But so on the one hand, we have that concern, this sort of deontological concern that one has a right to one's body in a fundamental way. And on the other side are the more consequential concerns about market forces. Market forces have won out so far. So, we can swallow hard and get over our visceral reactions, I guess. So market logic holds sway. This is, they give a couple of examples of how this has worked out. The court case of Diamond versus Chakrabarty in 1980 confirmed the patentability of microorganisms. This catalyzed the growth of patents in biotechnology. More recently, Harvard University's successful patenting of the Onco mouse demonstrated that in the US and Europe, the courts judged that organisms are likewise patentable subject matter. So this is the World Health Organization, and they're considering reactions from around the world, different religions, different cultures, and trying to take all of that into account. There are also, aside from objections to patenting tissue and the body generally, objections to patenting ideas. Two sorts of arguments are given here: deontological and utilitarian. The deontological, again, like just visceral reaction to patenting tissue and parts of the body, and the utilitarian or consequentialist arguments that are more market related. Let's consider examples of both. Here's one that raises questions about patenting ideas. This is no, it's not a fictional case. Dr. Jack Singer, a Vermont ophthalmic surgeon who removes cataracts about 250 times a year, specializes in an incision that removes the need for an incision. Dr. Samuel Palin, an Arizona ophthalmic surgeon, claims to own the procedure for stitchless cataract surgery. He has a patent to support his claim that Dr. Singer and others who use the technique patented by Dr. Palin should pay him royalties. Patents for techniques used to be very rare, but are now issued several times a week. However, the AMA says it knows of no doctor who has paid another one royalties. Dr. John Glasson, chair of the AMA Council on Judicial and Ethical Affairs, raised questions saying, how can anyone claim to own the way one turns one's knife when performing surgery? How can anyone, some claim that no more can a painter own the way she holds her brush, or a golfer own the way he handles a club, should it be possible for a surgeon to own a technique. The AMA Council fears that patents will restrict access to treatment, obstruct peer review of new therapies, add to the cost of healthcare, and be impossible to enforce. However, within the field of medicine, patents are common, and for decades, medical techniques have been patented as the directions for using a device that was patented at the same time. So generally, it's devices that are patented and information accompanies them. Given this, Dr. Palin asks, how can the AMA rationally take the position that a pure method patent is unethical while a combined method and device patent does not. He also notes that the Hippocratic Oath says nothing about intellectual property. So discomfort over the idea of owning an idea as such as opposed to a device. Lost my place here, excuse me. And the next one is legal case on owning the body again. John Moore, a patient with hairy cell leukemia, had his spleen removed at the University of California, Los Angeles School of Medicine in 1976. His physician, Dr. David Gold, patented certain chemicals in Moore's blood purportedly without his knowledge or consent and set up contracts with a Boston company negotiating shares worth $3 million. Sandoz, the Swiss pharmaceutical company, paid a reported $15 million for the right to develop the MO cell line. Moore began to suspect that his tissue was being used for purposes beyond his personal care when UCLA cancer specialists kept taking samples of blood, bone marrow, skin, and sperm for 7 years. When Moore discovered in 1984 that he had become a patent number, he sued the doctors for malpractice and property theft. His physicians claimed that Moore had waived his interest in his body parts when he signed a general consent form giving the UCLA pathology department the right to dispose of his removed tissue. But Moore felt that his integrity was violated, his body exploited, and his tissue turned into a product. He said, "My doctors are claiming that my humanity, my genetic essence is their invention and their property. They view me as a mine from which to extract biological material. I was harvested." The court held that clinicians must, they decided against Moore on purely utilitarian reasons that investigators needed financial incentives to pursue much of the research that they do. Utilitarian arguments, though, depend on empirical evidence. It's the world that makes that action right or wrong. The absence of definitive justification for the expansion of intellectual property rights to genetic sequences adds weight to arguments based on intuitions about the wrongness of extending intellectual property to biological entities. At the very least, the WHO says the situation suggests the need for public dialogue in advance of policy. The UNESCO Declaration on the Human Genome and Human Rights claim that the human genome is the common heritage of humanity. It's not only biological, but also historical, and perhaps has moral significance. A contrary argument charges genetic essentialism, exaggerated importance given to genetics for behavior, identity, and culture. Is genetic sequencing a public good? What is a public good? A public good is one that is non-rivalrous and inappropriable. They give the classic example of air, that in breathing air, one does not deprive anyone else of anything of value. But here's an important distinction. Contrast genomic data with air. Genomic data requires technology to access it. Also, the generation of genomic data requires a different set of institutional and analytic tools than the translation of that data into practical applications. The application works more, they say, like drug development and less like basic science, and may therefore require the financial incentives of the patent system to justify the investment of time and capital. If true, it could be the case that permitting some level of appropriation would introduce more benefits to the public than costs. What about sharing the benefits? What are the considerations determining fairness in the distribution of goods coming out of genomic research and bioengineering? The Human Genome Organization, an international organization of scientists involved in human genetics, their ethics committee, makes three arguments to justify benefit sharing. First, 99.9% of the human genome is common to all humans. This entails responsibility grounded on human solidarity to share in the benefits of research based on this common good. Second, there's the long legal history of viewing global resources such as the sea, air, and space as common goods to be equitably available to all humans and protected for future generations. The human genome can equally be regarded as a common heritage. Third, vast differences in power and wealth between those conducting human genetic research and those providing genetic samples for such research, as well as the potential for substantial profits, raise concerns of exploitation. The Hugo Ethics Committee sees benefit sharing as a way to address these concerns. They give us an example of Canavan's disease. This is an inherited fatal neurodegenerative disease affecting largely Ashkenazi Jews. In 2000, several of families who were afflicted with this disorder, as well as various patient associations, sued Miami Children's Hospital, at which research was done that led to a 1993 discovery of the gene linked to Canavan disease. So these families sued Miami Children's Hospital for what they judged to be an unacceptably restrictive and costly licensing strategy. Following the issuance of the patent for the disease-related gene, 1 in 4 labs in the US stopped offering a test for Canavan disease because of the conditions that the Miami Children's Hospital attempted to impose on them. Canavan Foundation had at one time offered genetic testing free of charge, but ended that practice after it was devised the patentee would require payment of royalties in compliance with specific license terms if it wished to continue offering the test. The case was settled out of court on terms that were not made public. Then there are legal issues. DNA, in at least some respects, does not meet the legal requirement criteria of patentability. And I'll ask that you pay special attention to this one, that you'll see a question in the second exam questions for this. Gets us to think about patents. One view is that DNA's value lies principally in its informational content rather than its material qualities. So patenting DNA would represent a departure not only from patent practice, but from the concept of a patent itself, which is based on an agreement to share information in exchange for giving the inventor rights over the material invention. This would present new challenges to those needing the information. Another set of concerns relates to the traditional distinction between inventions and discoveries. So the first concern is that what is DNA? Its value is as information. Patents work by, generally it's a device that's patented, and unlike a trade secret, there is no secret. If you get a patent, you get the state or the federal government to protect your right to your idea, to the device, and then you're paid royalties for it. But there is no secret. Then all the information about it is made public. Of course, what the government, what society gets out of it is innovation based on one's idea that then has the protection of a patent. But here's the rub. In the case of DNA, if what you're patenting is a particular DNA sequencing, which, as they mentioned, is it's not simply natural, like it's not breathing air, which anyone has access to air to obtain genomic data requires technology. The problem is that it's information, and information in terms of patenting has always been the thing that is made available. So you're trying to make information to secure a right to information. And this just is in tension with the whole idea of patent. So that was the first area of concern. And the other is the distinction between inventions and discoveries. This bears on the question of what constitutes genuine innovation. For example, well, we've mentioned the general reluctance to patent natural objects The European directive permits the patenting of biological entities that have been isolated from their natural state, which have been shown to have a certain utility or industrial application. And then they provide this very interesting example. Imagine a researcher who, by experiment, learns that a plant growing in its natural habitat is able to take up toxins in the soil. A second researcher takes the plant and moves it into contaminated soil, demonstrating its utility to clean up the environment. At least intuitively, the second person did something one might be prepared to call innovative. His colleague's achievement, on the other hand, while useful in generating scientific knowledge, was less obviously innovative. But to what extent? What counts as obvious, well, they said, depends on the state of the technology and of the science at any point in its development. Patents can affect access to useful genomic products like genetic tests in at least 4 ways: improving incentives to develop useful tests, increasing the cost of available services, imposing transaction costs and inconvenience on research and development, and impeding the transfer of existing tools and technologies. Despite the great success of the Human Genome Project, it's not at all clear that the work to translate new genomic data into clinical useful applications can rely on the same model. The complexity of gene to gene and gene to environment interactions makes the task of turning promising targets into concrete applications particularly challenging. In the case of common conditions that affect people universally, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, patents provide incentives for investment because companies can be assured that they'll recoup development costs from markets in developed countries. Therefore, that's the second problem, which was increasing the cost of available services. There are well-known examples of patents on diagnostic tests resulting in the increased cost of existing services. Remember the Canavan disease example, familial breast cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and hemochromatosis. Licensing costs have put tests for those diseases out of the reach of many people. Patent laws vary internationally. The U.S. is a well-developed system of patent law built up over 200 years. The U.S. has developed a pro-patent court system, as well as an expansive understanding of what's patentable and an unrigorous, non-obviousness criterion, which differs from countries such as Japan and EU countries. About patents as incentives for research in genomics. The development of new drugs has slowed. This may be the result of changes in technology and methodology for doing research. It could also be due to an underestimation of the difficulties inherent in translating advances in basic science into treatments for specific conditions. This again suggests the need to balance incentives offered by patenting with the need to make platform technologies as accessible as possible to applied research and development. Analogies are useful always, particularly in bioethics. In any area of innovation, you take something that's not well understood and try to understand it in terms of something that's better understood. Could the open source approach of software industry find application here? Open source is a licensing system that doesn't require payment, but does require that any innovation based on using an open source invention be made available in the public domain. The cost of access is the enrichment of the public domain. The close relation between biotechnology and IT, as demonstrated by the emergence of bioinformatics and data mining, suggests the aptness of the analogy. Open source critics say, on the other hand, that it has yet to prove its value in the promotion of innovation. DNA may yet be among entities excluded from patentability. And then they provide several examples at the end of the article. Well, our next essay will be Yvonne Denier, From Brute Luck to Option Luck on Genetics, Justice, and Moral Responsibility in Reproduction. So it is in the section on genetic testing and screening.